Hi, welcome to this tutorial. This is going to be the first tutorial in a series where I talk about the different things that I use to make my units work in my RTS game that I've been working on. It's not going to be comprehensive because there's just too much stuff that is very unique to what I'm working on, so I'm going to try and talk about more generalized things. So for this episode, I'm going to be talking about state machines. So what is a state machine? The dictionary definition of a state machine is really boring. The way I think of a state machine is like a choose your own adventure book. You have the possible actions that you can do when you're in a state, and then you have the resultant states that those actions put you in, right? So let's say you're reading a choose your own adventure book, and the first page you start out on this cliff, and you can either go left or go right. So let's try and go left and see what happens. Oh no, you fell to your death, and since you're dead, there's no way to get back to the initial state, so we have to reset. Alright, now we can choose to go right, and if we go right, we'll end up at the house. When we get to the house, we can either go back left again, or we can do a whole bunch of things. We can now open the door to the house, we can set it on fire, commit arson, whatever you want to do. Paired with the Unity component system, this becomes very, very powerful. Here's an example of what I have for my units in my game. If we're idling, then we're constantly checking for an enemy. If we encounter an enemy, then we go into seek mode if we're too far away to attack it. If we're in seek mode and we're close enough to attack it, then we go into attack mode, etc., etc. We want our unit to change behavior, but not have a bunch of cluttered code. What we can do is we can just attach and detach scripts at runtime that define whatever we want our unit to do. You can see that's happening here with this tank as it stops and goes when it gets to its destination. Alright, so to start off, we've got our regular game object that's got a sphere collider and a rigid body and all that jazz attached to it, and when we run the game, it doesn't do anything. Well, okay, it falls to the ground, I guess, but it doesn't have any behavior. We're going to want to create a script that controls the behavior of all of our different types of units, and we're going to call that something like base behavior. This is going to be the script that is always attached to the unit, and it's going to lend out information to all of the behavior scripts as they're attached and detached. Since this is an RTS game, one of the important things that each unit is going to have is a different team. Now we're also going to need references to hold all of our different scripts. So we're going to have an attack script, a seek script, and an idle script. I'm going to make these pretty simple and let you figure out how you want to define your own behavior for your game on your own. We're also going to need a reference to a target object, and we need to have a variable that records the current state. That text has a red squiggly under it because we haven't defined the unit SFM enums, so we're going to do that now. We're going to have 3 enum types, one for each of our possible scripts. So these enums are going to be what allows us to have that finite state machine behavior. Next up is a public function called change state that's going to allow us to switch between the different states by changing the assigned enumerated type. And it's going to attach and detach the scripts that need to be attached and detached. So if the case is idle, we're going to attach the idle script component, and we're going to remove the seek and attack script component. That way we're not trying to do a whole bunch of things at once. Before attaching that idle component, we're going to make sure that there's not already one attached, so we check to make sure that it's null. Also, I apologize, there's an error here. When I put the destroy command, I accidentally said to destroy the script, like not the instance of the script, but just the script as a type. That's not correct, so the correction is up here on the screen now. The other two are just copy and pasted, but with some of the names changed, so I'm just going to leave that up on the screen for you guys to copy. Make sure that in start, when we're initializing, we're going to be changing our state to idle, so that way nothing weird happens with the object trying to drive off or attack something that doesn't exist. And now the way that we're going to change states, our transition between idle and seek, so we just want to move towards stuff, is going to be when the user presses the spacebar. This is just so that we can get an example that shows that the state machine is working. Alright, so now we're going to make scripts that correspond to what we had in that base behavior script. So we want an attacking script, a seek script, and an idle script. Alright, so now we can attach our base behavior script to our game object, and we'll see that if we run the game, nothing happens still. So we've got to define our behavior scripts next. So let's start off with the idle script because that one's pretty barren. So first thing we want to do is have a reference that points to the base behavior script so that way we can access all the variables that are stored in it. And then we need to assign that reference as soon as the game starts. So in start, we're going to use getComponent to grab that base behavior object off of the game object. Lastly, we're just going to draw some text above the game object that lets us know that it's an idle state. I'll leave this stuff up on the screen for a little bit so you guys can copy if you want. You'll now see that if we run the game that little white sphere says that it's idle. So cool, now we know that it's in an idle state. Great. Now we're going to start fleshing out that seek script component. So first thing we want to do is add a target reference and a reference to the base behavior, of course. And then in start, just like with the last one, we're going to get the base behavior game component off of the game object. We're also going to copy a reference of the target object from the base behavior script into this script. Down at the bottom, we're going to create a function called Seekpoint, and what that is going to do is that is just going to move towards our target. So we're going to check if the distance between us and our target object is within some threshold. If it's below that threshold, we're going to go to an idle state. If it's outside of that threshold, then we're going to keep moving towards the target object. Once again, I'm going to leave the code up for you guys to copy for a second. Now we're going to make sure that every update we're calling that Seekpoint function to move towards the target. And last thing we're going to do is just draw some text that tells us whether or not we're in seek mode. So now when we hit play, we should be able to hit space and toggle between our idle and seek scripts. Well, actually we're not able to because I didn't set the target, so I got to set the target first. Alright, now after assigning the target, if we hit play, we'll be able to toggle back and forth between the idle and seek state. Except it's not toggling, it's just going straight there and stopping. So here's what was wrong. I forgot to assign a value to state when change state is called, so the state machine was never actually getting updated. This is the change state function in base behavior, by the way. Once again, here's what the lines should look like, and this is all going to be on GitHub by the time I upload this. Alright, so now that that has been fixed, you can see that we can switch between the idle and seek states every time we press the spacebar. This is a super simple example, but this is the core of state machines and how I control my units in my game. The next couple of videos I'm going to talk about movement using agents and then also making little squads like this, since I think this is one of the more fun things I've gotten to work on in this game. And then I'm also probably going to do a tutorial on flow field pathfinding, even though I don't think I'm going to keep using it for my game, but I've gotten enough questions asking me to make a video about it, so I'm probably going to make a full-fledged tutorial. Other than that, I don't have any ideas for future tutorials, so if there's something that you saw in one of my videos that you have a question about, feel free to let me know. All right, thanks.